might make you uncomfortable. People are always watching. Not everyone, not all the time, but enough that it matters. And it's not just hackers or scammers online. It's the acquaintance you barely know at work, the friend of a friend at that dinner party, the person who noticed your new watch or your designer shoes and started putting the pieces together. We assume danger looks like a shadowy figure in a dark alley, but more often it's someone smiling to your face while silently calculating your worth. Criminals don't typically go after billionaires. Why would they? The ultra-rich have cameras, private security, alarm systems, legal teams. They're a hassle, but you're accessible. You've got just enough to make the risk worth it. You post vacation photos while you're still out of town. You share stories about that huge raise at work. You show off your new tech, your home renovation, your luxury purchase, without realizing that every brag is a breadcrumb. The psychological trap here is simple. We think the world is rooting for us, and many people are, but not everyone. And in the shadows of those congratulations are people who don't feel inspired by your success. They feel entitled to it. They feel like they deserve what you have and they don't care how they get it. This is where Stoicism comes in. Quiet strength, inner stability, and discretion. The Stoics didn't flaunt their achievements, not because they weren't proud, but because they knew pride doesn't require an audience. They believed that peace comes from control of the self, of one's desires, of one's actions. When you practice Stoic thinking, you resist the need to overshare. You begin to ask, why do I feel the urge to post this? Is it for connection or validation? Is it for expression or ego? You gain clarity. You start to value your privacy the way a soldier values their armor, not as something to hide behind, but as something that keeps you safe. So what's the solution? It's simple, but not easy. You need to become more intentional about what you share and why. You don't have to lie. You don't have to be paranoid, but you and discretion, that's your shield. Use it. 2. Do not disclose location and travel schedule. Have you ever had that jolt of fear when you suddenly realize someone knows where you are and they shouldn't? It's a feeling that grabs you by the spine and doesn't let go. In the age of oversharing, most people don't even recognize the danger they've invited into their lives. We casually post photos from airports, check into coffee shops, tag locations in real time. We think we're just sharing moments. But what we're really doing is giving away our most valuable possession, our whereabouts. And in the wrong hands, that information becomes a weapon. A few years back, there was a woman I knew, Maya. She was newly engaged, full of life, and loved documenting everything on Instagram. One weekend, her fiancé surprised her with a trip to Lake Tahoe. She posted the moment they hit the road, then shared scenic views from their cabin. On day 2, she uploaded a photo of them snowshoeing, laughing under the caption, "No cell signal, no problems." But there was a problem. Someone from her past, a man she'd cut off after an uncomfortable encounter months earlier, had been quietly watching her feed. He saw the trip unfold in real time. Become a liability. Stoic philosophy teaches us to value what we can control and to let go of what we can't. Your safety is something you can control, but only if you stop offering your movements up for public consumption. The Stoics believed in inner strength over outward recognition. They trained themselves to enjoy experiences without the need to display them. That's the mindset we need now more than ever. When you live stoically, you learn that not everything meaningful has to be shared in the moment. You delay gratification. You protect your peace. You understand that your safety, your privacy, your power, they're worth more than a fleeting like or a few heart emojis. You begin to question, what do I gain from posting this now? Who do I trust with this information? What's the cost if the wrong person sees this? That kind of self-inquiry is more powerful than any security system. It makes you less predictable, less exposed, and far harder to manipulate. So here's what you do. Shift the timing. Post your trip photos after you're back. Share that fun dinner spot after you've left. Talk about your routines only with people you know deeply and trust entirely. Don't tag locations in real time. And most importantly, stop thinking that caution equals fear. It doesn't. It means you're aware, that you see the world as it is, not how you wish it were. We live in a time where even joy can make you a target if it's shared carelessly. But when you protect your location, when you guard your movements, you reclaim control. You turn your life from an open invitation into something more sacred, more protected. Because the most dangerous people in this world don't need to break in. They just wait for you to open the door. And when your location is public, you've already left the door wide open. Privacy is the modern-day fortress. And the strongest walls are built not with fear, but with intention. Be quiet, be careful, be stoic. If you found these insights valuable, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear from you. 3. Do not disclose information about personal security systems. The walls have ears. And today, those ears belong to people who have no business knowing anything about your life. In a hyper-connected world where our instincts to share have been rewired by likes and attention, even the most innocent-sounding detail can become a crack in your armor. One of the most dangerous things people casually talk about without realizing the risk? Their home security. Or worse, the lack of it. It often starts with pride, a sense of responsibility. Someone just installed a brand new security system, motion sensors, cameras, smart locks, so they post about it. Maybe a quick selfie in front of the security keypad with a caption about finally upgrading the house seems like a responsible move. But in reality, they've just published a detailed blueprint of their home defense to anyone watching with ill intent. They've turned their strongest protection into a public challenge for someone looking to bypass it. What was meant to discourage danger can actually invite it, because now the wrong people know what kind of system they'd need to disable and how valuable the contents of that home must be to warrant such protection in the first place. Now, flip the scenario. Some people downplay their setup altogether. "Nothing to steal here," they'll say at a dinner party or in a neighborhood group chat. Never needed joke about being class of 2007, a tagged photo of your brother with your shared last name. None of this alone seems significant, but together it narrows down your age, your birthplace, your family network, and in many cases, enough to reconstruct partial social security numbers or craft realistic phishing attacks. Once they know where you bank or which apps you use, they don't have to guess. They'll mirror those platforms, make the emails look perfect, and bait you into clicking what you thought was just another routine notification. This is where the Stoic mindset becomes not just helpful, but necessary. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That clarity of action applies to the digital world too. Stoicism is about self-discipline, about controlling what you can and letting go of what you can't. And you can control what you share. You can choose silence over impulse. You can pause before you post and ask yourself, who benefits from this information? Who could exploit it? Would I still share this if I imagined it in the hands of a stranger with bad intentions? Living by Stoic values means treating your personal data like your physical body, with respect, with boundaries, and with an understanding that exposure can have consequences. It means realizing that you don't owe anyone your full story, especially not the anonymous, ever-watching eyes of the internet. You can live fully without laying yourself bare. You can connect without giving away the blueprint to your identity. The solution isn't to be paranoid, it's to be precise. Use false answers for security questions that only you know. Don't post about the apps or platforms you use for finances or shopping. Regularly audit your online presence. Go through your old posts, delete what no longer needs to live online, tighten your privacy settings. Make it hard for strangers to build a version of you you never gave them permission to create. You lock your front door without thinking. Your digital life deserves the same vigilance. Melissa didn't get hacked because she was careless. She got hacked because she trusted a system that rewards oversharing and punishes discretion. But we can break that system. Stoicism. What if I told you that the most powerful response to disrespect isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it isn't a grand speech that leaves the room silent? No, it's silence itself. Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But here's what they don't teach you: how to not react, how to disappear, detach, and let your absence become the most piercing response of all. Because when someone disrespects you, your instincts scream for retaliation. You want to defend yourself, prove a point, maybe even humiliate them just enough so they never dare again. But Stoicism teaches us something deeper. The ultimate power lies not in what you say, but in what you silently remove. Your energy, your presence, your emotional availability. This video isn't about turning the other cheek in some passive, naive way. It's about mastering the kind of silence that shakes their soul, the kind that forces them to sit in their own shadow. In the words of Epictetus, no man is free who is not master of himself. So if you've ever been disrespected, overlooked, underestimated, this is for you. We're about to break down 5 silent moves that will make them regret ever crossing you, without you ever raising your voice. If this message already resonates, take a second to like this video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, comment your favorite silent power move, and share this with someone who needs it. Because real power doesn't need permission, it only needs presence. And today, you're going to reclaim yours. Silent Move 1. Withdraw access without explanation. There's a moment, a quiet one, when you realize the most powerful thing you can do isn't raise your voice or explain yourself one more time. It's to stop showing up, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because you've finally understood something most people never will. Your energy is not a public service. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, they're not just crossing a boundary, they're depending on your silence to keep doing it. They assume you'll stay, that your kindness, your patience, your emotional labor will always be there, waiting for them. They bank on your consistency because it benefits their chaos. And that's exactly why withdrawal, complete, silent, unannounced, is so powerful. Epictetus, the Stoic master of inner freedom, believed that true strength is found not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. He taught that we suffer not from the events themselves, but from our judgments about them. So, when you pull away, not angrily, not dramatically, but quietly, you shift the emotional dynamic in a way they never expected. You're not being passive, you're not sulking, you're doing what Epictetus called choosing conscious suffering over reactionary chaos. You are removing their access to your presence, and in doing so, you force them to face the one thing they've avoided all along, themselves. Most people live in patterns. They expect certain emotional reactions. They expect arguments, tears, explanations, because those things give them power. But when you disappear from that pattern, you create a silence that becomes psychologically unbearable. Suddenly, they have no one to perform for, no one to manipulate, no one to blame. And this, Epictetus would argue, is where their real suffering begins. It's not your confrontation that disturbs them, it's your absence, because that absence becomes a mirror, one they can no longer escape. A mirror that doesn't shout or judge, it just reflects. And without the noise of your justifications clouding their perception, they're left with nothing but the image of their own behavior staring back at them. Now here's where the Stoic philosophy truly becomes a solution. Instead of retaliating, you're rising. You're not engaging in petty revenge or emotional games. You're protecting your inner peace. You're stepping back because your presence was never meant to be taken for granted. Epictetus reminds us that the key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. When someone fails to meet that standard repeatedly, Stoicism doesn't tell you to fight. It tells you to walk away with clarity, not noise, to remove the emotion and keep the principle. And let's be honest, it's hard, especially when the disrespect comes from someone close, a friend, a sibling, a partner, the desire to fix it, to explain your pain, to get closure. That's all real. But that's also where you learn the difference between ego and wisdom. The ego wants to be understood. Wisdom wants peace. And the Stoics always chose peace, even when it hurt. Why? Because that pain of detachment is temporary. The pain of staying somewhere you're not valued, that's corrosive. You may feel like disappearing is weak, that by walking away, you're letting them win. But Epictetus would challenge that completely. He'd ask, if someone has harmed you, why add to the injury by remaining entangled? And he'd be right. By staying, you become complicit in your own disrespect. By leaving, you reclaim your sovereignty. Your absence becomes not an act of cruelty, but one of sacred preservation. You are no longer performing emotional labor for people who refuse to grow. And here's the deeper truth most people miss. When you walk away without explanation, they remember you differently. Not as angry, not as broken, but as someone who had the strength to say nothing and still be heard. Over time, your silence will echo louder than any final conversation. Because while they expected you to beg, you vanished. While they assumed you'd come running, you never looked back. And in that haunting silence, the regret begins. Not because you punished them, but because you finally valued yourself more than their approval. Think about that. Think about how many times you've stayed longer than you should have, hoping they'd change, hoping they'd see your worth, hoping your patience would pay off. And now ask yourself, where did that lead you? If you're honest, the answer is exhaustion. But Stoicism offers a better path. It tells you that you owe no one your peace, that the only person who must understand your choices is you, that walking away isn't giving up, it's leveling up. And that's the move. Withdraw access, no speech, no drama, just stillness. Let the silence do the explaining. Because the moment they realize they no longer have access to your time, your mind, your soul, that's when the real consequences begin. It's not revenge, it's evolution, it's not bitterness, it's boundaries. And now that you understand that, we're ready to go deeper. Because what comes after the withdrawal is even more powerful. It's not enough to walk away, you have to rise in private. And that brings us to move two. Move two, level up in private. One of the most misunderstood forms of power is growth in silence. In a world obsessed with proving, posting, and performing, choosing to evolve privately isn't just rare, it's threatening. Especially to those who once disrespected you. Because here's the truth most people overlook. The same ones who dismissed you, doubted you, or disrespected you. They were counting on you staying stuck. They needed you predictable. They relied on your wounds to keep you visible, reactive, and emotionally accessible. But what happens when you suddenly stop showing up the way they expect? What happens when your life begins to move without them and you don't say a word? Epictetus taught that everything external, status, praise, even disrespect, is beyond our control. But what is within our control is our inner life, our choices, and our direction. When you begin to focus on your own psychological space, without needing to explain or defend yourself, you enter what Epictetus would call true freedom. It's the beginning of Stoic transformation. The conscious decision to pour into your inner world rather than try to fix the outer one. And make no mistake, this unnerves people. They may pretend not to notice your silence, but they do. They feel it. Because suddenly you're no longer orbiting around their moods, their needs, their drama. You've stepped into your own gravitational field, and it shakes them in ways they can't name. At first, they'll tell themselves you're just going through a phase, that you'll come back like you always did. But Stoic discipline is not a mood, it's a shift. And when that shift becomes consistent, their certainty begins to unravel. You're not posting about your next move, you're not clapping back, you're simply disappearing from the emotional stage they used to control. And that silence, it grows heavier with time, because you're not just withdrawing, you're transforming, not loudly, not with applause, but deeply, inwardly, consistently. This kind of transformation is what Epictetus meant when he spoke of strength in adversity, to keep your peace when you're expected to perform, to sharpen your mind while others gossip, to walk away from shallow validation in favor of substance. And while they're watching, waiting for a sign of weakness, waiting for your return, you're building, you're reading, you're reflecting, you're investing in your health, your goals, your growth. You're doing the kind of work that doesn't get likes or comments, but that turns silence into a storm. And here's what hits them hardest. They can't place you anymore. The version of you they knew doesn't exist. The old patterns don't apply. You don't argue like you used to. You don't respond to bait. You don't even make eye contact in the same way. Your energy no longer orbits them. It's anchored elsewhere. And that unpredictability, that quiet shift in power, is psychologically destabilizing to those who once thrived on your emotional predictability. Epictetus believed that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And this is what freedom looks like, moving in silence, growing in depth, while others are still trying to provoke a reaction that no longer exists. Let's be clear, this isn't about pretending you're unaffected. It's about choosing what to focus on. You're not hiding, you're healing. You're not ignoring them. You've simply redirected your attention, and you didn't do it for revenge. You did it for survival, for clarity, for your future, because at some point you understood that real success doesn't need witnesses, that the most powerful revenge isn't a comeback speech, it's a quiet life built with intention. Epictetus would say, don't explain your philosophy, embody it, and you are. Every time you grow in silence, you embody restraint, discipline, clarity, everything the Stoics valued. You stop defending your worth and you start becoming undeniable. They'll notice. Not all at once, but in small, unsettling ways. In your posture, your pace, your peace, the way you no longer flinch when they enter the room, the way your smile doesn't need their approval. And over time, they'll begin to realize they lost access to a version of you they never valued. Not because you made a scene, but because you made a decision. And here's where the pain really begins, for them. Because the Stoic path doesn't just lead to self-mastery, it forces others to see the void they created. They begin to regret not your silence, but everything they did that led to it. And you? You're too focused to care. You've tasted peace. You've felt what it's like to level up without dragging the past behind you. And now you refuse to go back. That's the beauty of the second move. The more you grow quietly, the less you owe anyone an explanation. And that brings us to the next move, one even more potent. Because it's not just about what you stop giving them, it's about what you stop feeling for them. The next level of Stoic strength is not just silence, but emotional unavailability. And when that sets in, everything changes. Let's talk about it. Move 3. Become emotionally unavailable. There comes a point when your silence stops being a pause and becomes a decision. Not a dramatic one, not loud or vindictive, but deliberate. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You no longer respond to provocations. You've stepped out of the emotional ring entirely. And people notice. The ones who once pushed your buttons, who expected you to react on cue, they sense the difference. Not because you told them, but because your detachment makes their chaos echo louder in the absence of your participation. This is what Epictetus would call emotional sovereignty, the refusal to allow others to dictate your state of mind. Most people live their lives handing out emotional access like free samples, reacting to every opinion, every criticism, every petty jab. But what Stoicism teaches us is that true composure is not about suppression, it's about regulation. It's about seeing the storm and refusing to become it. And in today's world, that's radical. You see, when someone disrespects you, they often expect a script to play out. They expect the raised voice, the defensive text, the long explanation, because that reaction feeds them. It confirms they still have power over you, and when you stop giving them that, when you stay calm, when you vanish emotionally, they start to unravel. Think about this. Emotional unavailability doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means your emotions are no longer accessible to people who haven't earned the right to touch them. That's not cruelty, it's discipline. It's a reallocation of energy. You no longer attend every argument you're invited to. You no longer offer explanations to people who never listened in the first place. That detachment becomes a form of psychological protection, but also a tool of transformation. Your lack of reaction forces others to face their behavior without your emotional cushion. And this is where the Stoic philosophy becomes deeply personal. Epictetus reminded his students that we are disturbed not by things, but by the view we take of them. When you become emotionally unavailable, it's not because you've stopped caring about life. It's because you've started caring correctly. You no longer view their approval or validation as necessary to your peace. Their insults don't mean what they used to. Their opinions carry less weight. Why? Because you've shifted from seeking emotional justice to choosing inner justice. And nothing confuses those who mistreated you more than your silence in the face of their noise. This isn't just theory. Take someone like Princess Diana. In the last years of her life, she stopped defending herself publicly. She stopped playing the royal game. She disengaged from the dysfunction and focused on her mission, quietly, strategically, with purpose. She didn't seek revenge. She let her dignity speak for her. That emotional unavailability wasn't weakness. It was clarity. It was power. The same tabloid culture that once fed on her vulnerability began to respect her stillness. That's how withdrawal works. Not in the moment, but in the long game. Now ask yourself, how many times have you over-explained, overshared, overreacted to people who never deserved that access to begin with? How much of your energy was spent trying to be understood by people who couldn't even see you clearly? Stoicism offers an antidote. Remove the performance. Choose composure over chaos. The people who once pulled strings in your mind can't do that anymore. Not because you've changed them, but because you've changed what you respond to. This is the evolution they don't expect. They thought you'd stay small. They thought your confidence depended on their opinion. But when you become emotionally unavailable, you send a quiet message. I've outgrown this conversation. And while they gossip, provoke, or spiral, you're focused elsewhere. You're building something deeper, something silent, something rooted. And the more you do, the more their influence fades, not because you hate them, but because you love your peace more. Epictetus would call this conscious control, not over others, but over yourself. He taught that the only true freedom is the freedom of the mind. When you stop letting others dictate your emotional state, when you can stay still while the world demands a reaction, you've already won. Not in their eyes, because they'll never understand it, but in your own. You don't owe them your anger. You don't owe them your clarity. You owe yourself consistency. That's why this move is so necessary. You don't need to block them, curse them, or announce your detachment. You simply remove your emotional labor from the equation. No one hears the door close, but eventually they feel the cold. And in that silence, your composure becomes the loudest response you've ever given. And once you've mastered that, it's time to take it one step further. Because being emotionally unavailable is powerful, but setting silent boundaries is what cements your transformation. And that's exactly where we're going next. 4. Enforce boundaries silently. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from setting boundaries and never explaining them. Not because you owe no one clarity, but because the people who truly care about you won't require explanations for your self-respect. The ones who push, guilt trip, or question your limits are usually the very ones who benefited from you not having any in the first place. And when you finally draw the line, not with noise or drama, but with calm detachment, they begin to notice. Not because you made a grand announcement, but because the access they once had is gone. When someone disrespects you, the first instinct is to explain. You want them to understand how much it hurt. You want them to get it, so they'll stop, so they'll see you differently, so they'll change. But that instinct, though natural, is often a trap. It keeps you tethered to the same dynamic that drained you. Epictetus, the Stoic master of detachment and dignity, would argue that your peace doesn't need their permission. It only needs your decision, and that decision is best made in silence. Because true boundaries are not about teaching others. They're about teaching yourself what you will and will not allow. They're about protecting your energy like it matters, not through confrontation, not through ultimatums, but through what Epictetus called conscious withdrawal from emotional dependence. You don't need to block every number or write a long message. You simply stop engaging in ways that betray your own well-being. You stop replying to messages that always leave you feeling smaller. You stop saying yes to people who never ask how you're doing. You stop participating in dynamics where your presence is only valued when it's convenient for them. And it doesn't happen overnight. At first, they won't notice. Your silence will be interpreted as moodiness, as distance, maybe even as passive aggression. But slowly, very slowly, they begin to realize what's really happening. It's not that you're punishing them. You've simply recalibrated your standards, and they're no longer meeting them. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. That's what Epictetus meant when he said, "No person is free who is not master of himself." Setting boundaries in silence might be one of the hardest things you ever do. Not because it's complicated, but because it requires you to resist the urge to defend your peace. It means letting go of the need to be understood by people who have no intention of understanding you. It means choosing discomfort now so you don't have to carry resentment later. It's not about controlling others, it's about controlling how long you expose yourself to disrespect. This is where many people get it wrong. They confuse revenge with healing. They think cutting someone off is about teaching them a lesson. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches that revenge is emotional debt. It keeps you psychologically tied to the very people who drained you in the first place. You keep replaying the offense. You keep needing them to see your pain. But in doing so, you're still centering them. And Epictetus would urge you to let that go. Because revenge, even when justified, is a form of bondage. Instead, Stoicism offers a clean, clear alternative. Align your actions with your values and move on. No need for closure, no need for justice, no need for spectacle. Just exit the cycle. And what you'll discover is that life begins to mirror that decision. The people who match your new standard begin to appear. The chaos quiets down. Your inner world grows sharper, more whole, because the energy you used to spend managing other people's dysfunction is now redirected toward building yourself. Some people will try to come back. They'll notice your absence. They'll wonder what changed. But by then, the gap between who you were and who you've become will be too wide for them to cross. Not because you're unforgiving, but because you've finally realized that your peace is sacred. And once you've enforced your boundaries with that kind of stillness and strength, you're ready for the final, most haunting move. Not just disappearing physically, but emotionally, removing yourself from the cycle completely. Not with anger, but with grace. That's what we'll explore next. Because when you disappear with dignity, it becomes the final message, the one they feel long after you've gone. 5. Disappear with dignity. There comes a time when silence isn't just strength, it's survival. When someone continues to disrespect you, test your boundaries, ignore your value, and still expects your loyalty, the wisest thing you can do isn't to retaliate. It's to leave, not with a grand exit, not with final words, emotional confrontations, or dramatic closure. Just leave quietly, completely, and with dignity. That, Epictetus would say, is the final act of self-respect. Because when you disappear from a situation that continuously dishonors your worth, you're not running away. You're returning to yourself. The people who mistreat you count on your presence. They rely on your predictable tolerance. They expect you to keep explaining, to keep trying, to keep caring. But Stoic wisdom teaches that continuing to show up for those who do not value your effort is not compassion, it's self-neglect. At some point, your silence must become your boundary, not because you want to punish them, but because you're no longer willing to abandon yourself in order to keep the peace. Disappearing isn't pettiness, it's protection. It's how you reclaim your time, your focus, and your emotional capacity from relationships that only took and never gave. And here's the part most people never expect. Your absence speaks louder than anything you could say. While they expected a reaction, you gave them stillness. While they anticipated an explanation, you offered none. That emptiness, that silence, it forces them to face their own behavior in a way your words never could. They're left sitting in the space where your energy used to be. And in that space, they begin to feel the loss. Not because you yelled, but because you stopped showing up. That absence becomes a mirror they can't avoid. Epictetus taught that we must never base our peace on anything outside of our control, including people, including closure, including understanding. When you leave with dignity, you refuse to beg for resolution. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You let go of the hope that one day they'll see your worth. Because now, you see it for yourself. You don't engage in meaningless conversations anymore. You don't try to fix what you didn't break. You don't explain what should have been self-evident. Instead, you walk away, not to make them regret, but because you no longer tolerate disrespect in any form. This type of disappearance is not avoidance. It's discipline. It's not running. It's choosing. Choosing to end a pattern that's become toxic. Choosing to no longer participate in dynamics that insult your soul. Choosing your peace, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. The Stoics called this self-mastery, the ability to walk away from what doesn't serve your higher self, even if you once cared deeply for it. At first, they might reach out. Maybe not directly, maybe through vague messages, indirect comments, or mutual acquaintances. But by then, you've evolved into someone who doesn't need to look back. You've outgrown the cycle, not out of bitterness, but from clarity. You've built a life where their dysfunction no longer has a role. And that, Epictetus would argue, is the ultimate freedom. Not needing to punish, not needing to explain, simply removing yourself without guilt or noise. Eventually, they'll realize that your presence was never an obligation. It was a gift. And they lost it, not through a single moment, but through their repeated refusal to honor it. That realization doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly. When they notice your name no longer shows up, when they realize your attention has moved elsewhere, when they feel the cold absence of your emotional investment, that's when it sinks in, not because you shouted, but because you left and left well. This is the final silent move, and it's the one that completes the cycle of Stoic transformation. You've gone from tolerating to detaching, from reacting to rising, from explaining to enforcing, and now from engaging to exiting. And when you leave with dignity, calm, clear, and unbothered, you close the door in a way that cannot be reopened. You don't leave space for confusion, you leave space for growth, theirs if they're ready, but most importantly, yours. Your disappearance was never about revenge. It was about rebirth. As Epictetus taught, the greatest freedom is choosing what and who you allow into your peace. When you walk away from what wounds you, you walk toward what heals you. The people who once took your presence for granted will feel your absence in ways words could never deliver. No arguments, no explanations, just stillness and strength. And in that silence, they'll finally understand they lost something rare. So the next time someone underestimates your value, remember, you owe no one access to your soul. Let your silence be the loudest message they ever hear. If this video helped you see your worth more clearly, hit that like button, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, and share it with someone who's ready to rise quietly, powerfully, and on their own terms. Drop a comment below. My silence is my strength. Because from this point on, you don't need to say a word. You are the message. And here is the third video. This video will give you another perspective on Stoicism. The most dangerous person in your life is rarely the one who shouts the loudest or throws the first punch. No, real danger often comes wrapped in warmth, patience, and a smile that never quite reaches the eyes. They won't raise their voice. They won't leave obvious scars. Instead, they'll quietly rearrange your reality, one small, calculated move at a time, until you no longer trust your own instincts. And that's exactly how they win. The Stoics warned us that evil rarely walks in announcing itself. It sits beside you, it earns your trust, and then it slowly convinces you that the warning bells in your head are just overthinking. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already standing on ground they've been pulling out from under you piece by piece. In this video, we're going to expose 10 quiet, almost invisible signs that you're far too close to someone who will dismantle you if you let them. If you're ready to see what most people miss, hit like. Subscribe to Stoic Training for raw truth without the sugarcoating, and drop a 1 in claiming certain discussions never happened. The man dismissed it as poor communication. But months later, he realized he was second-guessing his own memory so often that he had stopped making decisions without confirming them with his partner. That's the trap. Once you've been conditioned to question yourself, you become dependent on their version of events. And in that dependency, they gain power. Psychologists call this gaslighting, and it's one of the most effective forms of manipulation because it doesn't just control your actions, it rewires your sense of truth. You begin to feel unsteady, unsure, as if reality itself is a shifting floor beneath your feet. Marcus Aurelius warned, if it's not true, don't say it. If it's not right, don't do it. The manipulator's philosophy is the opposite. They thrive in the gray areas where facts can be blurred just enough to keep you questioning yourself, but not enough for you to confront them with certainty. This constant distortion is exhausting, and that exhaustion works in their favor. When you're too tired to challenge them, you're easier to control. The Stoic answer is to anchor yourself in objective reality and record it when necessary. Keep written notes of agreements, follow up conversations with clear summaries, and trust your own senses unless proven otherwise. The goal isn't to argue them into honesty. You'll never win that fight, but to keep your perception sharp enough that their fog can't settle over you. And while this tactic is one of the most insidious, it rarely comes alone. Once someone starts bending your reality, the next step is often to isolate your perspective entirely, which is where we turn next. 2. They never celebrate you fully. Psychologists have a term for what some people do when they acknowledge your achievement but immediately undercut it. It's called backhanded praise. On the surface, it looks like support. They might compliment your work, your success, or your progress, but there's always an asterisk attached, a subtle qualifier that turns pride into doubt. It might sound like advice, perspective, or even concern, but the impact is the same. You're accompanied ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. When someone's approval becomes the gate through which all your pride must pass, you've surrendered control over one of the most essential parts of your identity, your self-respect. The solution isn't to shut yourself off from all feedback, it's to separate genuine growth-oriented advice from manipulative, diminishing commentary. Genuine feedback builds without belittling. It points out room for improvement while still allowing you to own your current success. The harmful version subtly keeps you in check, so you never feel fully secure without them. A Stoic doesn't mistake the sound of applause for the presence of respect. They measure their worth internally, rooted in effort, principle, and discipline, not in the shifting moods of another person. If the recognition you receive comes with a leash attached, it isn't recognition, it's conditioning. And once you learn to spot that, you'll also start noticing the next form of quiet harm, the calculated creation of guilt to keep you in place. 3. They're always the victim. One of the most telling traits of a truly harmful person is their ability to cast themselves as the perpetual victim. No matter the situation, no matter how clearly their actions caused harm, they will find a way to redirect blame outward. If they lie, it's because someone forced them into it. If they hurt someone, it's because circumstances left them no choice. Life is always happening to them, never because of them. This is more than simple denial. It's a calculated tactic that manipulates your natural compassion into a tool for their protection. When you feel sorry for them, you're less likely to hold them accountable. When you view them as wounded, you become willing to excuse behaviors you would never tolerate from someone else. And over time, that compassion becomes a leash. You stay, you forgive, you overlook, not because it's right, but because you've been made to believe that abandoning them would be an act of cruelty. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." The manipulative person knows this instinctively and exploits it. They feed you a constant stream of imagined grievances, exaggerated hardships, and one-sided stories designed to keep you sympathetic. The more you buy into their narrative, the more their suffering becomes your responsibility to fix. The Stoic sees this for what it is, a transfer of burden. Your role shifts from an equal partner, friend, or family member into a caretaker for their perpetual crises. crises that often exist more in drama than in reality. Stoic philosophy teaches that while empathy is noble, it must be balanced with reason. True compassion does not mean enabling harmful behavior or allowing someone's self-pity to dictate your actions. The moment you notice that every interaction leaves you feeling responsible for their life, you must step back and evaluate. Are you helping, or are you being held in place by the weight of a story that never ends? A Stoic chooses to stand in truth, even if it means walking away from someone's endless performance of pain. And just as they use pity to tether you emotionally, the next tactic often appears as something else entirely: a strategic removal of your independence. Had the perfect relationship. That's exactly how this tactic works. The public image becomes a shield, making it harder for you to be believed if you speak up. From a psychological perspective, this duality creates a form of cognitive dissonance. You cling to the public version of them, hoping it's the real one, while enduring the private disrespect in silence. Over time, this wears down your self-worth because you start measuring your value by how they treat you in front of others, rather than how they treat you when no one is looking. The Stoics warned against being fooled by appearances. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can show me that what I think or do is wrong, I will gladly change. But until then, I will hold to what is true." The truth here is simple. Respect that disappears when the audience leaves was never respect. It was a performance. And no matter how convincing the act, the private reality is the one that reveals their character. Recognizing this pattern is liberating because it frees you from chasing the good version of them as if it's something you can earn. You stop mistaking selective respect for genuine care and start measuring relationships by consistency, not by moments. And often, when this selective respect starts to falter, the harmful person will employ another tactic to keep you off balance, using your own insecurities as quiet weapons against you. That's the sign we'll uncover next. 5. They starve you of certainty. One of the most subtle yet exhausting tactics harmful people use is keeping you in a constant state of uncertainty. They're vague about their plans, unclear about their commitments, and evasive when you seek direct answers. You're left piecing together fragments, trying to interpret tone, reading between the lines, and filling in the gaps with your own assumptions. This isn't poor communication or forgetfulness, it's deliberate. Confusion becomes their leash, keeping you mentally tethered as you wait for them to finally clarify what they want. From a psychological perspective, this is a form of intermittent reinforcement, the same tactic used in gambling. By giving you occasional moments of clarity or affection, they condition you to tolerate long stretches of uncertainty in the hope of another small reward. Over time, this keeps you chasing their approval or attention, often without realizing how much control they've gained over your thoughts and emotions. The Stoics understood that clarity is a form of freedom. Epictetus would remind us that you cannot live well if your peace depends on someone else's unpredictable moods or shifting intentions. If someone truly values you, rather than a deliberate one. The Stoic solution is simple, though not always easy. Refuse to live in prolonged ambiguity. When answers are consistently withheld, see it as the answer in itself. People who truly care about you don't let you live in confusion. They don't keep the ground beneath you unstable. They offer clarity because they want you to stand firmly, not because they're afraid of what will happen if you do. And once uncertainty loses its grip on you, you'll start to notice another tactic harmful people often use, disguising criticism as concern so it slips past your defenses. That's the next sign to watch for. 6. They undermine your other connections. Psychologists have long noted that one of the most effective ways to control another person is to weaken their support network. Harmful people do this not through open demands, but through subtle erosion, offhand remarks about your friends, quiet suggestions that certain family members don't have your best interests at heart, or constant positioning of themselves as the only person who truly understands you. The aim is not to convince you all at once, but to plant seeds of doubt until your circle thins out naturally. This tactic is dangerous because isolation doesn't feel like isolation at first. It feels like closeness. You start spending more time with them, not because they forbid you from seeing others, but because they've made you question whether anyone else is truly worth your trust. And the fewer perspectives you hear, the more their voice becomes the dominant one in your life. The Stoics warned about the company we keep. Epictetus advised, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." If someone's presence leads to the quiet disappearance of your other meaningful relationships, you are not being uplifted, you're being contained. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. When all your thoughts are filtered through one person's influence, your independence begins to dissolve. The solution is to actively guard the diversity of your connections. A healthy relationship does not require you to shrink your circle. It strengthens your ability to interact widely and confidently. Real love and respect do not fear outside influence. They welcome it. If your world is getting smaller, if you're speaking to fewer people, and if you find yourself relying on one person for all emotional interpretation, that is not closeness, it's captivity. And those who isolate you often use the next step to cement that control, eroding your confidence in ways so subtle you might not even notice until it's almost gone. That's the sign we'll uncover next. 7. They smile at your struggle. One of the darker signs of a truly harmful person is their reaction when life knocks you down. They may not burst into obvious laughter, that would be too revealing, but you'll notice the subtle cues. A smirk they fail to hide when you make a mistake. A measured pause before responding to your bad news, as if savoring it. A joking remark about your misfortune that somehow cuts deeper than any honest criticism. These are not slips of the tongue or harmless quirks. They are moments of unguarded truth, when the mask of empathy slips and you glimpse the satisfaction they take in your hardship. I once watched a man share news about losing a major client in his business. Instead of offering genuine support, his supposed friend leaned back, smiled faintly and said, "Well, maybe this will finally teach you not to be so confident." That single sentence revealed everything. It wasn't advice. It was a celebration disguised as concern. And while the sting of betrayal fades with time, the realization that someone enjoyed your pain leaves a far deeper scar. From a psychological standpoint, this behavior often comes from envy or insecurity. Your successes threaten them, so your struggles become moments of relief, proof that you're not so perfect after all. By finding joy in your setbacks, they regain a fleeting sense of superiority. Marcus Aurelius offered a solution rooted in dignity. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. The Stoic response is not to try to change the harmful person. You cannot remove malice from another's heart, but to stand so firmly in your own composure that their private enjoyment of your pain becomes meaningless. You deny them the reaction they seek. Recognizing this pattern is crucial, because those who smile at your struggle rarely stop there. The next step is often more invasive, undermining your goals and progress under the guise of helping you. And that's the next warning sign you need to be ready for. 8. They keep score. One of the most corrosive traits in a harmful person is their inability to give without expecting something in return. On the surface, they may seem generous, offering help, doing favors, or providing resources when you need them. But these gestures are never truly free. Each one comes with an invisible tally mark, part of a mental ledger you can't see but will eventually feel. At some point, often when it benefits them most, they will cash in on these so-called gifts, framing them as debts you owe. This is not generosity, it's transaction disguised as kindness. True giving, as the Stoics understood, ends the moment the gift leaves your hands. Epictetus would say that a gift ceases to be a gift if it is given for the sake of return. When a person's acts of kindness are driven by the expectation of repayment, whether through loyalty, obedience, or silence, they're not enriching your life, they're buying leverage over you. The psychological impact of this kind of giving is subtle but profound. You begin to feel an unspoken obligation to accommodate them, even in situations where you otherwise wouldn't. They don't have to demand compliance outright. The weight of their past kindness does the work for them. Over time, this debt-based dynamic reshapes your choices, making you less likely to assert yourself or set boundaries for fear of appearing ungrateful. The Stoic solution is to redefine what you accept and from whom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to receive without pride, let go without attachment. If accepting help means inheriting chains, it's not help, it's bait. Protecting your independence sometimes means declining what's offered, not out of pride, but out of the clarity that nothing given with strings is truly for your benefit. And often, those who keep score will escalate their control further by twisting your own emotions into tools against you, a tactic we'll expose in the next sign. 9. They're comfortable in the gray. One of the most dangerous qualities in a harmful person is their comfort in moral ambiguity. For them, right and wrong are not guiding principles, but flexible tools, bendable, adjustable, and always open to reinterpretation if it means securing an advantage. They treat ethics as negotiable, applying them only when convenient and discarding them the moment they become an obstacle. This is not adaptability. It's opportunism in its purest form. From a psychological standpoint, this is what researchers call moral disengagement, the mental process that allows someone to justify harmful actions without feeling guilt. They reframe their behavior, shift blame, or claim that context changes the rules. Over time, this creates a world where nothing is truly wrong if it serves their goals. And if you stay close to someone like this, your own moral boundaries will be tested, not with obvious demands, but with subtle compromises that erode your integrity piece by piece. The Stoics warned about such corruption. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The harmful person operates by the inverse of this rule. If it benefits them, they will do it. And if it serves their agenda, they will say it, regardless of the truth. Epictetus taught that a person's true strength is measured by what they refuse to trade away, even under pressure. The one who thrives in the grey has already sold their principles cheaply, and they will sell yours too if it serves their advantage. To protect yourself, you must stand firmly on your own moral ground, even when it's costly. Refuse to rationalize behavior that contradicts your core values, no matter how persuasive the argument or how minor the compromise appears. Once you start bending your principles for someone else's comfort, you will soon find yourself standing on ground that is no longer your own. And often, those who live comfortably in this moral twilight have one more defining trait. They can walk away from the damage they cause without a flicker of remorse. That final sign is where we turn next. 10. They drain without touching. Some harmful people never raise their voice, never insult you directly, and never create obvious conflict. Instead, their impact is measured in how you feel after being around them. You notice the weight, not in your body, but in your mind. Your thoughts feel muddier, your focus slips, and a subtle heaviness lingers long after they've left. It's not dramatic enough to point to a single moment, but the cumulative effect is unmistakable. They corrode your peace without ever touching you. I remember speaking with a man who said he couldn't understand why he always felt so depleted after visiting a certain friend. There were no arguments, no overt tension, just an undercurrent of comparison, small interruptions, and quiet shifts in tone that left him doubting himself by the end of each conversation. That's the hidden signature of a harmful person. They change the climate of your inner world without leaving any obvious evidence behind. Psychologically, this is emotional depletion, a draining of mental resources through subtle cues, body language, tone, or an energy of constant judgment. It's why you can feel exhausted after certain interactions, even when nothing happened. And the danger is that you may blame yourself for feeling that way, convincing yourself it's just your own mood or overthinking. Marcus Aurelius understood the importance of protecting this inner climate when he wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." If someone's presence consistently muddies those thoughts, they are not safe to keep near, regardless of how polite, charming, or well-meaning they appear. The Stoic solution is to guard your mental space with the same vigilance you would guard your home. Not every guest is worth inviting inside. If you consistently feel worse after someone leaves, that's all the proof you need. You don't need a confrontation, an explanation, or their approval to step back. You only need to choose peace over erosion. And understanding all 10 of these quiet signs isn't just about spotting harm. It's about reclaiming the clarity and strength that harmful people try to steal. That's exactly what we'll seal this lesson with in the conclusion. The greatest danger isn't just being hurt, it's being slowly conditioned to see that hurt as normal. That's how harmful people win. Not through one big blow, but through steady, quiet erosion until you can't even remember what peace feels like. A Stoic knows the first duty is to guard the mind. You don't wait for undeniable proof. You don't gamble on the hope they'll change. You see the signs, and you step back before their chaos becomes your climate. Because every day you stay close to someone like this, you're teaching yourself to survive in a smaller, darker world. If this opened your eyes, hit like. Subscribe to Stoic Training for more truth without the sugarcoating, and drop a quick 1 in the comments if you're choosing to protect your peace starting today. Harmful people will always exist, but you alone decide how close they get to your soul. And that decision, once made with clarity, changes everything.